Ambassador Ji-Woo Park stood in the center of the Grand Council chamber and tried not to feel small. The room was enormous, built to hold representatives from 200 different species. Above her, the ceiling stretched so high she could barely see it. Around her, council members sat in curved rows that rose like a stadium. Some were tall and covered in scales. Others floated in tanks of liquid. A few glowed with their own light. Ji-Woo was just human. Average height, dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, wearing Earth's diplomatic uniform. She held a data pad with information about her planet and her people. The Vrothan Chancellor sat at the highest point in the chamber. He was twice as tall as any human, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished stone. His voice boomed through the room without needing a microphone. "The Galactic Council will now hear Earth's petition for membership," he announced. "Ambassador Park, you may present your case." Ji-Woo touched her data pad and began. "Honored council members, humanity comes before you in hope and friendship. Earth is home to 8 billion people across 200 nations. We have achieved space travel, established colonies on 3 planets, and successfully made first contact with 7 species before reaching this council." She showed images of Earth, blue oceans, green forests, cities that sparkled with lights at night. She showed humans working together, building, creating, and helping each other. The council members watched with what looked like polite boredom. The Chancellor gestured to his assistant, who began reading from a report. "Let us review Earth's evaluation scores. Military strength, bottom 12% of evaluated species. Technological advancement, bottom 15%. Resource extraction capability, bottom 20%. Territorial expansion rate, bottom 8%. Ji-Woo felt her stomach sink, but kept her face calm. A council member who looked like a giant insect clicked its mandibles. "Their weapons are primitive, chemical propulsion and simple energy shields. They have not even mastered quantum field manipulation." "Their territory is laughably small," added another member, this one a being made of crystalline structures. 3 planets and a few mining stations. We have members who control hundreds of systems." The Chancellor nodded slowly. "Ambassador Park, you must understand that the Galactic Council operates on principles of strength and capability. We face constant threats from hostile forces. We need members who can contribute meaningful military power, advanced technology, and vast resources." Ji-Woo took a deep breath. "With respect, Chancellor, humanity may not have the largest military or the most advanced weapons, but we have other qualities. We are adaptable. We are creative. We care deeply about cooperation and—" "Cooperation?" The insect-like council member interrupted with a sound that might have been laughter. "Every species claims to value cooperation, but when war comes, cooperation means nothing without strength to back it up." The Chancellor raised one of his 4 hands, and the chamber fell silent. "The Council has made its evaluation. Humanity is hereby classified as cosmically irrelevant. You are granted observer status only. You may attend council sessions but have no voting rights. You will receive no military protection guarantees. You will pay standard membership fees but receive only basic trade access." Ji-Woo felt the words like a physical blow. Cosmically irrelevant. She had prepared for rejection, but not for such harsh dismissal. She thought about the billions of people back on Earth who had hoped for so much more. But she did not argue. She did not plead. Instead, she bowed her head slightly and said, "The people of Earth accept your decision, Chancellor. We have only one small request." The Chancellor seemed surprised by her calm response. "What request?" "We ask permission to maintain cultural exchange programs, to send human teachers, doctors, and engineers to any worlds that wish to host them, to learn from other species and share what little knowledge we have. We believe that understanding between species has value, even if we cannot contribute military strength." The council members looked at each other. Several seemed confused by such a modest request. The Chancellor waved a hand dismissively. Such programs are permitted for all observer species. They are considered harmless. You may proceed with your cultural exchanges. He made it sound like he was granting permission for children to have a play date. Thank you, Chancellor, Ji-woo said quietly. As the session ended and other business began, Ji-woo gathered her datapad and walked toward the exit. She could hear council members already talking about more important matters. To them, Earth and humanity had already been forgotten. In the corridor outside, Ji-woo finally allowed herself a moment of emotion. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Cosmically irrelevant. The words would hurt many people back home. Her communication device buzzed. It was a message from Earth's president. How did it go? Ji-woo composed herself and recorded a response. We were classified as observer status only. No voting rights, no protection guarantees. We rank at the bottom of their evaluation metrics. She paused, then added, but they approved our cultural exchange programs. We can send our people out into the galaxy. She ended the recording and sent it. Then she looked out a nearby window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there were thousands of worlds, billions of beings, and countless opportunities to prove that the Council's metrics were not the only way to measure worth. Ji-woo thought about the doctors she knew who would volunteer to help on struggling worlds, the teachers who would share knowledge with anyone willing to learn, the engineers who could solve problems with creativity instead of just advanced technology, the counselors who knew how to help people heal from trauma. Maybe the Council was right. Maybe humans were irrelevant by their standards. But Ji-woo believed that relevance could be measured in different ways, not by how much you could take or conquer, but by how much you could give and build. She straightened her uniform and walked toward the transport station. There was work to do. The Council had dismissed humanity as unimportant, but that just meant they would not pay attention to what humans did next. Sometimes being underestimated was its own kind of advantage. 5 years had passed since the Council's dismissal, and most of its members had completely forgotten about humanity. The humans had been filed away as irrelevant, and irrelevant things did not deserve attention. But humans had been busy. On the frontier world of Palaxis 7, Dr. Min-seo Chen wiped sweat from her forehead and smiled at the young Palaxian child sitting on her examination table. The child had 6 legs and fur that changed colors with emotion, currently showing nervous purple spots. You are very brave, Min-seo said gently through her translator device. The medicine will help your breathing get better. Come back in 7 days so I can check on you. The child's parent, a larger Palaxian, touched Min-seo's hand with one delicate claw. Thank you, Dr. Chen. Before you came, we had no medical care at all. The Council said our world was too small to matter. Min-seo packed her medical supplies into her bag. Every world matters. Every person matters. This was her 43rd clinic visit this month. Palaxis 7 was just one of 60 frontier worlds where human doctors had established free medical services. These worlds were too poor, too remote, or too small for the Galactic Council to care about. But humans cared. Min-seo had left a comfortable hospital on Earth to come here. So had 300 other human doctors scattered across forgotten worlds. They asked for no payment except food and shelter. They saved lives that no one else thought were worth saving. On the trade station orbiting Kessler Prime, Hae-jin Rivers sat across a table from 2 angry aliens. On his left was a Drenthian merchant, covered in blue scales and breathing smoke from her nostrils. On his right was a Thorvik trader, a being made of living metal who hummed with barely controlled rage. She stole my cargo! The Thorvik hummed loudly. He violated our trade agreement, the Drenthian hissed back. Hae-jin raised his hands calmly. Let us look at the facts together. The agreement stated delivery by the 3rd moon cycle. The 3rd moon cycle of which planet? Both aliens paused. They looked at each other, then at Hae-jin. Oh, the Drenthian said slowly. We never specified. Your planet has longer moon cycles than mine, the Thorvik admitted. I thought I was late. You thought I was early. Heijin smiled. A simple misunderstanding. Shall we write a new agreement with clear terms you both understand? 2 hours later, both aliens were shaking hands. Or claws, or whatever they had. The Thorvik turned to Heijin. You are the 8th human mediator I have met on different stations. Why are there so many of you helping with these small disputes? Because small disputes can become big wars if no one helps solve them early, Heijin replied. And because everyone deserves fairness, even in small matters. Across the galaxy, 400 human mediators worked in markets, stations, and colony worlds. They resolved arguments before they became fights. They helped species understand each other. They built bridges with patience and words. On the struggling colony of New Harvest, Sue Young Maxwell climbed down from the water purification system she had just repaired. The colony administrator, a tired-looking Grellian with gray skin and too many eyes, looked at her with gratitude. You fixed it? The administrator asked hopefully. Fixed and improved, Sue Young said, showing him her datapad. Your system was designed for a different climate. I adjusted it for your actual weather patterns. It should run 30% more efficiently now. We cannot pay much, the administrator said sadly. Sue Young waved her hand. I do not need payment, but if you know other colonies with problems, tell them a human engineer might be able to help. Word had spread. Human engineers showed up on failing colonies and fixed things, not with advanced technology, but with creative thinking and hard work. They looked at problems from new angles. They found solutions that did not require expensive equipment. 200 human engineers traveled between worlds that the Council had written off as lost causes. They saved colonies that should have failed. None of this appeared in Galactic Council reports. Humans were too irrelevant to track. The Council's monitoring systems watched for military buildups, territorial expansion, and technology developments. They did not watch for doctors opening clinics, mediators solving small disputes, or engineers fixing water systems. But while humans worked quietly, something else was building. In the Council's military headquarters, General Thaxacor studied the reports with growing concern. The Scalith Horde, a massive force of aggressive warriors who rejected Council membership, had been quiet for decades. Too quiet. They are moving ships, his intelligence officer reported. We have detected increased activity along 17 different border sectors. 17! Thaxacor's scales rattled with alarm. That is too many for simple raiding. They are planning something larger. The intelligence officer nodded. We believe they are preparing a coordinated assault, but we cannot determine their exact targets or timing. Thaxacor called an emergency meeting of the Military Council. 30 generals from different species gathered in the war room. They argued about defensive strategies, fleet deployments, and weapon systems. We should strike first, demanded a Korthian general. We should reinforce our strongest worlds, countered a Vrel admiral. We need our member worlds to contribute more warships, insisted another. They planned for war the way the Council always planned, with strength, with force, with intimidation. It had worked before. It would work again. None of them thought about the irrelevant humans scattered across the galaxy. None of them knew that Min Seo had treated patients from 80 different species, and those patients thought of her as a friend. None of them knew that Hai Jin had helped resolve conflicts for creatures from 100 different worlds, and those creatures trusted him. None of them knew that Sue Young had saved 17 colonies from failure, and those colonists would do anything she asked. The Council had dismissed humanity as cosmically irrelevant 5 years ago. In that time, humans had built something the Council never had. Genuine friendship with thousands of people across hundreds of worlds. Not friendship built on power or fear, but on kindness, help, and respect. Ambassador Jiwoo Park sat in Earth's Council observation booth and watched the military preparations with quiet concern. She received daily reports from humans across the galaxy. She knew about every clinic, every mediation, every repaired system. She knew that humanity had spent 5 years planting seeds of goodwill. She did not know if those seeds would matter when war came, but she believed that strength came in many forms, and not all of them could be measured by the Council's metrics. Below her, the Chancellor was giving a speech about military readiness and Council power. He spoke of weapons and warships, of conquest and control. Jiwoo thought about Minseo's clinics, Heijin's mediations, and Su-young's repairs. She thought about 8,000 humans who had left Earth not to conquer, but to help. The Council was preparing for war with strength. Humanity had prepared with something else entirely. Soon, everyone would see which preparation mattered more. The attacks came at dawn across 17 worlds simultaneously. The Scalith Horde struck with overwhelming force. Their warships tore through orbital defenses. Their soldiers landed on planets that had never seen war. Within hours, millions of civilians were fleeing burning cities while Council military forces scrambled to respond. In the Council chamber, the Chancellor slammed his fist on the table hard enough to crack the stone surface. How did they coordinate such a massive assault without our intelligence detecting it? General Thaxacor stood before the Council, his scales pale with stress. They planned for years, using secret routes through unclaimed space. Our sensors watched the major pathways but missed their movements through the frontier regions. What is our response? Demanded the Korthian representative. We have deployed battle fleets to all 17 systems, Thaxacor reported. But the Scalith are strong. They match us in firepower and technology. Our projections show a long, difficult campaign. The Chancellor turned to the assembled Council members. We need every member world to contribute additional military resources. Triple your warship deployments, double your weapons production. This horde must be crushed. Representatives began arguing immediately. Some species were already sending everything they had. Others protested that they needed ships to defend their own worlds. The chamber filled with heated debate. In her observation booth, Jiwoo Park listened to the chaos. Her hands were shaking. She had received reports from human volunteers on 12 of the attacked worlds. The messages were desperate. Cities burning, hospitals overwhelmed, refugees flooding into the countryside with nowhere to go. On Palaxis 7, Minseo had sent a simple message. Station destroyed. Treating wounded in cave shelters. Need supplies. Need help. From Kessler Prime, Heijin reported, thousands fleeing the fighting. They have no food, no water, no shelter. Children are dying. Su-young's message from New Harvest was blunt. Colony infrastructure collapsed. Power gone. Water system damaged. People will die without basic services. Jiwoo stood up. Her heart was pounding. The Council had dismissed humanity as irrelevant, and she had accepted that decision with dignity. But now, beings she cared about were suffering, and she could not stay silent. She walked down to the Council floor. Representatives glared at her. Observer species were not supposed to interrupt important sessions. The Chancellor noticed her approach. His expression showed annoyance. Ambassador Park, this is not the time. I request permission to speak, Jiwoo said clearly. Her voice did not shake. We are discussing military strategy for a major war, the Chancellor replied. Observer species have nothing to contribute to such matters. Please, Jiwoo said simply. I will be brief. The Chancellor sighed. Very well. Speak quickly. Jiwoo stood in the center of the chamber, just as she had 5 years ago. But this time she did not feel small. Honored Council members, I know humanity cannot contribute warships. I know we cannot offer advanced weapons or military strength. Then why are you wasting our time? Snapped the insect-like council member. Jiwoo continued calmly. But we can offer medical personnel. We have doctors trained in treating multiple species. We can offer supply coordinators who know how to organize refugee movements. We have counselors who can help traumatize populations. We have engineers who can restore basic infrastructure in damaged areas. The Crystalline Council member made a dismissive sound. The military will handle such matters after we win the war. How many civilians will die while you fight? Jiwoo asked quietly. How many will die from lack of medical care, from starvation, from collapsed water systems? Those deaths matter too. The Chancellor waved a hand. Your offer is noted, Ambassador Park, but the Council's priority must be military victory. Civilian support is secondary. Jiwoo looked at him steadily. With respect, Chancellor, I disagree. Wars are not won only on battlefields. They are won by keeping your people alive, your colonies functional, your populations hopeful. But I understand this is not how the Council sees war. She bowed slightly. Thank you for allowing me to speak. As Jiwoo walked back to her observation booth, she could hear Council members already forgetting her words and returning to military discussions. They were planning fleet movements and weapon deployments, arguments about who would contribute what forces. None of them noticed Jiwoo pull out her communication device. She sent a message to Earth with a single word. Activate. Across the galaxy, 8,000 humans received the same alert. It appeared on medical tablets in frontier clinics. It lit up communication devices carried by mediators on trade stations. It buzzed on the tools of engineers working in struggling colonies. The message was simple. Emergency response protocol. Deploy to nearest crisis zones. Full authority granted. Minseo looked at the alert on her device, and then at the 50 wounded Palaxians in the cave around her. She touched her communication link. This is Chen. I need medical supplies, volunteer doctors, and emergency transport to Palaxis 7, immediately. Within an hour, responses came flooding back. 15 doctors en route to your location. Supplies launching from nearest human transport. Arrival in 6 hours. Hei Jin stood in the refugee camp that was forming near Kessler Prime Station. Thousands of frightened beings huddled in temporary shelters. He activated his communication network. This is Rivers. I need food, water, shelter materials, and coordination volunteers. We have 8,000 refugees here and more coming every hour. Responses came quickly. Human supply ships redirecting. We have emergency rations for 10,000 beings. Shelter materials being fabricated now. Su Young surveyed the damaged infrastructure of New Harvest Colony. Power stations destroyed, water systems broken, communication arrays offline. She sent her message. This is Maxwell. I need engineering teams, repair equipment, and emergency power generators. This colony has 20,000 residents with no basic services. The responses were immediate. 3 engineering teams departing now. Equipment and generators loading for transport. Arrival in 12 hours. What the Council did not know was that humanity had prepared for this moment, not for war, but for crisis. Earth had stockpiled emergency supplies, medical equipment that worked for multiple species, food rations that dozens of different beings could eat, shelter materials that adapted to various environments. Human transport ships were loaded and ready to launch at a moment's notice. More importantly, humans had spent 5 years building trust. The Palaxian community remembered Minseo's kindness and offered their caves as shelter for medical stations. The traders Hei Jin had helped volunteered to transport refugees for free. The colonies Su Young had saved opened their homes to people fleeing the fighting. In the council chamber, military debates continued for hours. Battle strategies were planned. Fleet movements were coordinated. Weapons were prepared. None of them realized that while they argued, thousands of humans were already moving into action. Medical teams were deploying to war-torn worlds. Supply coordinators were establishing refugee support networks. Engineers were beginning emergency repairs to keep damaged colonies alive. The Council measured success by battles won. Humanity measured success by lives saved. By the time the first major space battle was fought 3 days later, human volunteers had already established medical stations on 14 worlds, organized refugee camps for 50,000 displaced beings, and restored basic services to 8 struggling colonies. The Council's war reports tracked ship movements and casualty counts. They did not track the thousands of civilians who survived because a human doctor treated their wounds, or the refugees who found shelter because a human mediator organized aid, or the colonies that did not collapse because a human engineer fixed their systems. Ji-Woo sat in her observation booth and watched the war unfold. She received constant updates from human volunteers across the crisis zones. The reports were exhausting, heartbreaking, but also hopeful. Medical station established, 200 patients treated in first day. Refugee camp operational, 5,000 beings fed and sheltered. Power restored to colony, water system functional again. The Council had called humans irrelevant. But right now, to thousands of suffering beings across 17 worlds, humans were the most relevant people in the galaxy. The war had been raging for 3 months, and General Thack's Corps was exhausted. The fighting continued across all 17 invaded worlds, brutal and grinding. His forces were holding, but barely. Every day brought new reports of casualties, damaged ships, and depleted resources. What confused him were the other reports, the strange ones. "General, another request from Palaxis 7. His aide reported. The garrison commander says civilian morale is surprisingly high despite the fighting. Medical casualties are lower than projected. They credit human support teams. Thack's Corps looked up from his tactical displays. Humans? What humans? Apparently there are human doctors there running medical stations. They have been treating wounded civilians and even some of our soldiers. This was the 5th such report this week. Thack's Corps pulled up the files. There were similar reports from 9 other battle zones. Humans providing medical care, organizing refugees, repairing infrastructure. He had been so focused on the fighting that he had not paid attention to these background details. "How many humans are we talking about?" he asked. His aide checked the data. "At least 2,000 across the war zones, sir. Possibly more." 2,000? Thack's Corps was shocked. "Where did they come from?" "They were already there, sir. Apparently, they have been on these worlds for years." Meanwhile, in the council chamber, the Vrothan Chancellor was having a similar conversation. A representative from Kessler Prime was speaking, and his words made no sense. "We must acknowledge the exceptional refugee management," the representative said. 50,000 displaced beings are being housed and fed efficiently. The Human Coordination Network has prevented the chaos we feared." "Human Coordination Network?" the Chancellor interrupted. "What are you talking about?" The representative seemed surprised. "The human mediators, Chancellor. They have been organizing refugee movements, managing supply distribution, and preventing conflicts between different species in the camps. Surely you were aware." The Chancellor was not aware. He called for a full report on human activities in the war zones. What he learned shocked him. Humans were operating medical facilities on 16 of the 17 invaded worlds. They had established refugee support systems that were feeding and sheltering over 100,000 displaced beings. They had restored basic services to 23 damaged colonies that should have collapsed by now. "How is this possible?" the Chancellor demanded. "We dismissed them as irrelevant 5 years ago. How do they have this kind of presence across our space?" His chief administrator pulled up the records. "According to our files, they requested permission for cultural exchange programs. We approved it because it seemed harmless. We never tracked where they went or what they did." The Chancellor felt something he rarely experienced, the cold touch of being wrong. But the truly shocking reports came next. A minor species called the Palaxians formally petitioned the Council for permission to send their small defense fleet to help fight the Scal-Ith. The Palaxians had only 6 warships, barely worth noticing, but they wanted to join the battle. Why would they do this? The Chancellor asked. The Palaxians never volunteered for military service before. The Palaxian representative stood before the council with quiet dignity. Dr. Mincio Chen saved my daughter's life 4 years ago. She has saved hundreds of our children. When she asked if we would help defend the worlds where she works, we could not refuse. We owe humanity a debt. 3 days later, the Grellians offered their supply ships to transport medical equipment for human doctors. The Thorviks provided free cargo space for refugee movements. The colonists of New Harvest sent food and materials to other struggling worlds. Species that the Council had written off as too small to matter were contributing to the war effort, not because the Council demanded it, but because humans had asked, and the impact was becoming clear. On the front lines, soldiers fought harder knowing their families were safe in human-run refugee camps. Colonies under siege held out longer because human engineers kept their life support systems running. Wounded civilians survived because human doctors treated them immediately instead of waiting for military hospitals. The Scalith Horde began to notice something was wrong. Their strategy had been to create chaos among civilian populations, forcing the Council to choose between protecting civilians and fighting battles. But the chaos was not happening. Civilians were being evacuated efficiently, wounded were being treated, basic services were being maintained. A captured Scalith commander was interrogated by Council intelligence. "Why are you losing?" the interrogator asked. "Your forces are equally matched with ours." The commander's answer was bitter. "Because you do not lose your will to fight. Usually, civilians panic. Refugees overwhelm your systems. Colonies collapse. Your people demand you stop fighting to save them. But not this time. This time your civilians are safe. Your colonies survive. Your people believe you can win. We break your will, and you win wars. This time, your will has not broken." The interrogator asked why. "The humans," the commander said with frustration. "Everywhere we attack, there are humans. They are not soldiers, but they are defending you better than soldiers could. They save your people. They give your people hope. We cannot break hope." This report reached the Chancellor's desk within hours. That evening, the Chancellor called an emergency private session with his senior advisors. Jiwoo Park was summoned to attend. She entered the private chamber with calm composure, though her heart was racing. The Chancellor and 5 other high-ranking council members sat around a small table. They all looked at her with expressions she could not quite read. "Ambassador Park," the Chancellor began slowly, "we have been reviewing the human activities in the war zones." "Yes, Chancellor," Jiwoo replied simply. "You have 2,000 volunteers providing critical support across our most damaged worlds. You have organized a refugee network that is managing over 100,000 displaced beings. You have maintained infrastructure in dozens of colonies that should have failed." Jiwoo nodded. "Yes, Chancellor." "How?" The Chancellor's voice was not angry, but genuinely confused. "We dismissed humanity as irrelevant. We did not track your movements or activities. How did you build such an extensive presence without our notice?" Jiwoo allowed herself a small smile. "You gave us permission for cultural exchange programs. We sent doctors to provide medical care. We sent mediators to help with disputes. We sent engineers to assist with technical problems. We went to places you did not watch because they seemed too small to matter." "And you built relationships," the Chancellor said quietly. "Yes," Jiwoo confirmed. "We built friendships. We helped people who needed help. We asked for nothing in return except the chance to be useful." The crystalline council member leaned forward. "The species you befriended are now contributing to the war effort because you asked them. The Palaxians, the Grellians, the Thorviks, dozens of others. They are not helping because we demanded it. They are helping because they care about you." "They are good people," Jiwoo said. They were only waiting for someone to see their worth. The Chancellor stood and walked to the window overlooking the council plaza. He was quiet for a long moment. 5 years ago, I declared humanity cosmically irrelevant. I measured your worth by military strength and territorial expansion. I did not see what you were building because I was not looking at the right things. He turned back to Ji Woo. Your people are not irrelevant, Ambassador Park. They may be the most relevant beings in this entire war. Not because of weapons or warships, but because they understand something we forgot. What is that, Chancellor? Ji Woo asked gently. That strength is not only measured in firepower. That relevance is not determined by conquest. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is help someone who needs it. Ji Woo felt tears trying to form, but kept her composure. Does the Council wish to change humanity's status? The Chancellor looked at his advisors. They all nodded. He turned back to Ji Woo. We wish to offer humanity full Council membership with all rights and protections, but I suspect you will negotiate for something else. Ji Woo smiled. You are beginning to know us, Chancellor. The war ended 4 months after it began. The Scalith Horde, unable to break the Council's resistance, sued for peace. Their strategy of creating civilian chaos had failed completely. Council worlds had suffered damage but not collapse. Populations had remained hopeful instead of desperate. The will to fight had never broken. The Council's military leaders claimed victory through superior tactics. Only a few understood the real reason. Thousands of humans had held the civilian population together while soldiers fought. The official peace ceremony was held in the Grand Council chamber. Representatives from all member species attended, wearing ceremonial clothing and displaying their finest weapons as symbols of strength. The Scalith delegation signed the peace treaty with obvious reluctance, but the next day the Chancellor called a special session. This one was different. It was smaller, more private, and only the senior council members attended. Ji Woo Park was invited to sit at the main table, not in the observer booth. It was the first time a human had been given such honor. The Chancellor stood and addressed the room. This session is to discuss humanity's status within the Galactic Council. 5 years ago, we classified them as cosmically irrelevant. The war has proven this assessment was profoundly wrong. The insect-like council member, who had mocked humanity years before, spoke next. Her voice was humble. I said that cooperation meant nothing without strength. I was wrong. Humanity showed us that cooperation is its own form of strength. Perhaps the strongest form. The crystalline member added, They built alliances we could never build, not through power or threats, but through genuine care for others. Species that ignored our demands helped willingly when humans asked. That is remarkable. The Chancellor turned to Ji Woo. Ambassador Park, the Council wishes to offer humanity full membership status. You would have voting rights on all matters, military protection guarantees, and access to our most advanced technology. You would join us as equals. Ji Woo sat quietly for a moment, her hands folded on the table. Every human on Earth had dreamed of this moment. Full Council membership was what they had hoped for 5 years ago, but 5 years had changed her perspective on what mattered. I am grateful for this offer, Chancellor, Ji Woo said carefully, but I must decline. Shock rippled through the room. The Chancellor's eyes widened. You decline? But this is what you requested 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I did not understand the galaxy the way I do now, Ji Woo explained. Humanity does not need Council membership to do our work. Our doctors will continue providing medical care whether we have a Council seat or not. Our mediators will keep helping resolve disputes. Our engineers will continue fixing problems wherever they find them. Then what do you want? The Chancellor asked, genuinely confused. Ji Woo pulled out a data pad and placed it on the table. I want recognition and protection for 63 species that the Council currently classifies as too small or too weak to matter. the Palaxians, the Grellians, the Thorviks, and 60 others. They contributed to this war effort. They saved lives. They deserve full council status. The council members looked at each other in surprise. Those species have minimal military forces, one member objected. They control very little territory. By our traditional metrics. Your traditional metrics were wrong, Jiwoo interrupted gently but firmly. You measured worth by military strength and missed the value these species possess. The Palaxians are brilliant medical researchers. The Grellians are exceptional administrators. The Thorviks are master craftspeople. They have so much to offer if you would see it. The Chancellor studied her carefully. You would refuse council membership for humanity in order to secure it for species you befriended? Yes, Jiwoo said simply, because that is what friendship means. You do not abandon people who helped you just because you got what you wanted. These species stood with us when we asked. We stand with them now. The crystalline member made a sound like wind chimes. This is very unusual. Most species would take membership for themselves and ignore others. Humanity is not most species, Jiwoo replied. We measure our worth by what we give, not what we take. If we took council membership and left our friends behind, we would be taking something we did not earn. The Chancellor was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. The Council will grant full membership status to all 63 species on your list. They will receive voting rights, protection guarantees, and access to Council resources. Thank you, Chancellor, Jiwoo said. But, the Chancellor continued, the Council insists that humanity also accepts full membership. You have earned it through your actions, and we will not allow you to refuse. Jiwoo smiled. Then I accept with gratitude. The formal announcement was made the next day. 64 species were elevated to full council membership, including humanity and all the species humans had befriended over 5 years. The council chamber had to be expanded to hold all the new representatives. For the first time, the Palaxian representative sat beside the Vrothan Chancellor as an equal. The Grellian administrator had voting rights on military matters. The Thorvik craftsperson could influence economic policy. During the ceremony, the Chancellor made a speech. For centuries, this council has measured strength through military power and territorial expansion. We built an organization based on what species could conquer and control. Today, we acknowledge that we were measuring the wrong things. He gestured to the new council members. These species did not conquer territory. They did not build massive fleets, but they contributed to our survival in ways we did not recognize, and humanity showed us how to see this contribution. After the ceremony, the Chancellor asked to speak with Jiwoo privately. They stood on a balcony overlooking the council plaza. Below them, representatives from hundreds of species celebrated the new members. I have a question, the Chancellor said. During the war, we asked you why humans helped even after we dismissed you as irrelevant. You never answered. Jiwoo looked out at the plaza. She could see Min Seo down there, talking with Palaxian doctors. Hei Jin was laughing with Thorvik traders. Su Young was discussing engineering with Grellian administrators. You judged our relevance by what we could take, Jiwoo said quietly. We measure our worth by what we can give. You looked at our military and saw weakness. We looked at our capacity for compassion and saw strength. And now? The Chancellor asked. Now perhaps the Council will look for both, Jiwoo replied. Military strength has its place, but so does the strength to heal, to build, to connect, to care. A truly powerful organization needs both types of strength. The Chancellor nodded slowly. We are revising our evaluation criteria for new species. Military capability will still matter, but we will also assess cooperation, cultural contribution, and capacity for building alliances. We will look for species who can give, not just take. That sounds like a better council, Jiwoo said. Over the following months, changes rippled through council space. Medical exchange programs were established, modeled on what human doctors had built. Mediation services became standard on trade stations. Engineering assistance was offered to struggling colonies. Other species began sending volunteers to help on frontier worlds. They learned from watching humans that strength could be measured in lives saved, problems solved, and friendships built. A year after the war ended, Jiwoo stood in the council chamber and watched a debate about resource allocation. The discussion was different now. Representatives talked about which worlds needed help, not just which worlds had strategic value. They discussed building schools and hospitals alongside military bases. The insect-like council member, who had once mocked humanity, was arguing that a small colony deserved support even though it had no military value. "Because people matter regardless of their strength," she said, and Jiwoo smiled. That evening, Jiwoo received a message from Earth. They wanted her to return home, to receive honors for changing humanity's position in the galaxy. She sent a message back. "I will visit soon, but my work here is not finished. There are still worlds that need help, still species that need recognition, still bridges to build." Because that was what humans did. They did not seek glory or power. They looked for places where they could help, people who needed them, problems they could solve. The Council had once declared humanity cosmically irrelevant. Now humanity sat at the center of a network of alliances, friendships, and cooperation that spanned hundreds of worlds, not through conquest, but through compassion, not through force, but through service. In the official council records, humanity's classification was changed. Where it once read cosmically irrelevant, it now said indispensable. But Jiwoo knew the real measure of humanity's worth was not in any official record. It was in the Palaxian child who grew up healthy because a human doctor cared. It was in the Thorvik trader who prospered because a human mediator helped resolve a dispute. It was in the Grelian colony that survived because a human engineer fixed their systems. Relevance was not determined by how much power you held. It was determined by how many lives you touched, how much hope you gave, how much you helped when others needed it. By that measure, humanity had never been irrelevant. They had just been waiting for the galaxy to understand what true strength looked like.